Good afternoon, Mike McGinnis with Successful Farming. I'm the markets editor for Successful Farming and agriculture.com. And once again, we're ready now to start the next panel. And the title is Renewable Energy. I want to introduce the panelists here. To my left, we have Dave VanderGriend of CEO, ICM. Brooke Coleman, the Executive Director of Advanced Biofuels Business Council in the middle, and Doug Berven, the Vice President of Corporate Affairs of POET. Berven, sorry.
That's all right.
What we're going to do is similar to what we did this morning. We're going to have the panelists provide a minute or so of their background and give us a feel for where they come from. And then also we will have Brooke offer up just a couple of minutes update on the latest RFS ruling from the EPA, just to give all these folks here today to put us on the same page. But first off, Dave, why don't you start?
Good morning. Welcome for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Bruce, for putting this on. As a ethanol plant design company, we've designed the majority of the plants that happen to be in Iowa. And as we have seen this industry grow from 2001 until 2010, for example, we have seen about a third of our corn being consumed, but also we've seen the growth of an industry as far as farming goes in production, a market for corn, and production has increased. So we're excited to be a part of this industry, and we are moving more into a global economy, which means there are ethanol production facilities going in South America and other parts of the world. I'll stop there.
Brooke?
Thank you for being, thanks for the invitation to be here. I run something called the Advanced Biofuels Business Council, which is essentially global and U.S. leaders in cellulosic biofuels. So some of the plants that everybody's familiar with, DuPont's plant locally, Quad County, Novozymes' enzyme plant, POET's plant, Emmitsburg, they're all part of this business council, and we represent them in D.C. and elsewhere, and et cetera, in the media. I hail from the agricultural powerhouse, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to lower your expectations a little bit, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I've been doing this for about 20 years, so I've learned a little bit, but I'll stop there.
Doug?
Yeah, Doug Berven, Vice President Corporate Affairs for POET. Been with the company for about 15 years, and unlike Brooke here, I drove this morning from Okoboji, Iowa to Des Moines through, man, Iowa is blessed with some great farmland. It is just incredible to see the corn and the soybean. And one of the things I want to get into a little bit today is what we're going to do with all that grain. As yields go like this and demand goes like this, prices do this. That's not good for farming. And farming is the backbone of our economy. And so hopefully we can get into some of those issues as we go forward.
Brooke has decided that he will give us an overview of the Renewable Fuels Standard and the new EPA proposal for 2018 RFS levels, and any other timing mentions that you would also like to mention as far as the open comment for the EPA.
Sure, I'll try to do it quickly. So, I've heard a lot today about markets, and the policy that drives markets on the fuel side, as most of you know, is the Renewable Fuel Standard. The critical thing that I think of with regard to the Renewable Fuel Standard is we are not blessed with a free market in motor fuels. We have OPEC controlling price. Anybody that has even a passing interest in the oil industry and fracking will know that over the last 2.5 years, OPEC actually manipulated price to run down that domestic industry. And so we have to rely on policy and regulation to drive that market opportunity that would otherwise be provided by a free market. So one of the things that I want to ask as part of the RFS discussion is even for conservatives to not be afraid to point to a regulation as needing to pry open the marketplace that is not free. Now where we are in the process with regard to the RFS is the 2018 required volume obligation is out. You heard every single member of Congress and governor that spoke this morning talk about the hearing they just went to on August 1st. That is because the comment period is open for that blending requirement. It ends on August 31st. We will need your participation. Call everybody, do comments, and then ultimately by November, it will be decided by final rule how much renewable fuel needs to be blended next year. They have decided to maintain the conventional biofuel requirement, which is good and expected. But for the first time, they have gone backwards on the advanced biofuel requirement and seem not to quite to understand that a lot of the innovation in next generation is happening in places like Iowa and not elsewhere. So with that, I'll stop.
Okay, very good. So the first question is, what does the latest DC Court of Appeals ruling mean? It's the lawsuit that was brought by many in the ethanol industry. But what does it mean specifically for the ethanol industry? And could you explain? It just happened fairly recently. Brooke, why don't you go ahead?
There's two major takeaways from that law. The first thing is the Obama administration essentially waived the RFS based on what they call distribution capacity. But that's what I call the oil industry's willingness to actually comply with the law. So the oil industry didn't make the proper arrangements to comply with the law by blending renewable fuel. The Obama administration said, we're going to waive it because you didn't do it, call it something fancy like distribution capacity. We challenged that in court and prevailed in a ruling about a week and a half ago. So supply means supply of renewable fuel as intended. It does not mean the willingness of the oil industry to use renewable fuel, and the DC Circuit found in our favor a week and a half ago. The last piece of that is that they also affirmed or reaffirmed, this is actually the second time they've done this, that EPA has to look forward and not backward when it comes to setting the cellulosic biofuel requirement, preserving what is a critical element of that law.
So we have the RFS, we have challenges with the EPA. Dave, maybe you can start on this. Why hasn't ethanol been able to go beyond the 10% blends essentially in the U.S. and why not? What's the answer? What's the future to be able to do that?
Well, I think the RFS was originally designed and intended to be a floor, to be what was talked about earlier, a safety net with crop insurance and things like this. It was to say, here's the floor under which you can market your product and you can incentivize your competitor, the petroleum industry, to be your customer buying your product and blending it. That was what it was intended to do. What it turned into was more of a ceiling and saying, okay, we're going to blend to 10%. We're not going to blend anymore. They're not going to do any infrastructure. We're not seeing E15 out in the marketplace. EPA did, if there's a 36 billion gallon renewable fuel standard and we only use 150 billion gallons of gasoline, that says that you can't get 36 billion gallons into that volume at an E10 level. You're going to be E15, you're going to be E20, you're going to be blends higher than where we are today. However, the oil companies did not want to lose that market share, and so consequently they stopped at E10. They did not put in the infrastructure, and EPA supported that by not allowing higher blends into vehicles and not in taking the incentives away from the auto industry to produce cars that can accept higher blends. They're just to E15 now on the last couple of year models that the auto industry has approved it. EPA has approved it from 2001. The auto industry is not, but they're not any higher. There's no E20, there's no E25. The only car that is certified for E25 is the smart car, the little small one from, I think it's BMW. But you can't legally put any gas in it. Now, they'll accept up to E25 on the owner's manual, but the stations are not allowed to sell it. So we have a lot of EPA regulations that have limited the ability of our industry to grow at the pace it wants to grow at.
Can I add to that just a touch? And maybe this is a little bit broad, but One of the reasons that we have not passed 10% ethanol in this country is because our competitors have spent hundreds of millions of dollars casting doubt in the mind of the American consumer. Are we starving people in other nations, right? Is ethanol bad for my car? Is it bad for the environment? All these things are myths perpetrated on the ethanol industry for the oil company to maintain market share. Nothing more, nothing less. They want to keep their market share, and to do that, they're taking a superior product, which is biofuels, and they're trying to minimize it. And since very few people really know about fuels, it's an easy scapegoat to make. And that has been a major problem of us getting over this E10 hurdle. But everybody in this room, you know, there's a lot of people that have their livelihood based on market availability for grains. And so I would hope that everybody in this room goes to your favorite retailer and just demand more ethanol in the fuel supply. If we can't do it, if we can't grow it in Iowa, we're not going to be able to do it in New York and California and everywhere else. It's a great place to start, and I hope everybody will do that. Just demand blender pumps, more higher blends of ethanol, and we'll grow the industry as it needs to grow.
Doug, question for you. It seems like on the surface it's a little confusing as to how the ethanol industry is doing. Let me give you some examples. On one hand, just recently, news reports indicate that some ethanol plants are converting to making beer because there's more margin in that. You also have Green Plains idling 9 plants from May to July. Yet ADM is reporting better earnings, and in South Dakota, you're getting ready to open up a new ethanol plant.
Right.
So what's the real story here?
Well, and we're also doubling the size of one of our plants in Ohio. Look, I don't think you can hide the benefits of ethanol forever. We have a very optimistic outlook for biofuels in general, whether that be starch-based biofuels or cellulosic biofuels. We see growth in all of that. Poet is setting record numbers of production today. Our margins aren't real wide, but production has been very good. So yeah, there are some reported issues out there, but we've seen those come and go over the years. I've been in this industry for a long time. We remember 2006 when it was just fantastic, crazy, and 2014, and then we've seen the years when it's been not so good. This is a year we're somewhat flat, but I think we're going to take off. So, like I said, we're very optimistic about it. We don't see an issue right now other than we want to grow. We don't want to just produce what we're producing. We want to grow as an industry. I know Dave does. Dave would like to be building plants in Iowa again. But we've got to find the markets, and that means we've got to get more ethanol in the pumps.
Dave, could you add to that?
Well, I would concur with what Doug has said here. The biggest challenge, as we said, for our industry, we're a commodity business. You guys are a commodity business in agriculture. You don't get to set the price of your corn. You don't get to set the price of your soybeans. It's a supply and demand, and we're in that same boat. We don't get to set the price for our ethanol. We don't get to set the price for the corn we buy. I mean, obviously we can, but you won't get any if you don't bid the market price. This has been a bit of a challenging year for our industry, but I guess if you weren't an eternal optimist, you wouldn't be a farmer. And if you weren't an eternal optimist, you probably wouldn't be in the ethanol business either. But point being, I think the future looks bright for ethanol if, in fact, we can get the people of, and I'll use Iowa because that's where we're at, the people of Iowa to be out there demanding higher blends of ethanol at the pump, blending it be available, and not being passive and sitting back and waiting for someone else to do it for you. There isn't anybody else that's going to do it for you. We completed a what we call an E30 challenge in Watertown, South Dakota last spring, where we did 50 cars, legacy vehicles. These are not flex fuel vehicles, running on E30. We put data loggers on them. We validated the mileage. We contracted with a mechanic shop in case we had any issues. We talked to the car dealers. We talked to all the stations. We put in blender pumps at 9 of the 11 stations in town so that it was readily available, and conducted this test. And when we were done, we had 0 issues with cars. Now that goes back to what Doug said just a few minutes ago, the myth of car issues. If in fact ethanol was so bad, Brazil should be a junkyard. Their gasoline is 27% ethanol for all their gas. And I was down there last month, and by golly, they have weed eaters. They have motorcycles, they have boats, they have cars, they have all the same things we have up here, and they run just fine on 27% ethanol. Why we can't do it up here has really nothing to do with the capability of the automobile and nothing to do with anything other than the scare tactics that are going on that disappointingly even some of you guys in agriculture buy into. Brooke?
Yeah, I think the only thing to add is it's sort of a reminder, and I'm one of the political people for this industry. The folks to my left and right are also very political and engaged in the process. But you know, we have to realize that we're not inventing the iPhone. We're not doing social media. We are trying to penetrate a marketplace that the incumbent does not want us to penetrate. So every gallon that we expand, we're taking away gallons from arguably the most powerful industry in the world. And so what that takes is, well, first of all, it's a grind. Second of all, we really have to engage in the process, because Doug mentioned that they're pounding us. I mean, it's maybe some months it's $6 million, but other months it's $10 million in PR effort to beat us up and try to turn the consumer away from our product. And I think it's easy to forget sometimes as we develop the most innovative liquid fuel in the world that, hey, why doesn't everybody want it? Well, you know, there's a reason for that, and there's a lot of money behind that, and that's why it's so important for our industry to fight for every inch, and that's why it's slower sometimes.
Let me throw a little bit of optimism too. We've got a group, it's called the Ag Auto Ethanol Working Group out there. It's a conglomeration of about 44, 50 companies, everybody from pump manufacturers to auto manufacturers to ethanol producers, and everybody in the ag world. And they are diligently working on bringing a high octane fuel to the marketplace, like an E25 or an E30 type blend, call it a 93 to 95 octane fuel. And if we can do that, the auto companies, they jump on a whole new technology curve where they can make a higher compression engine that gets more mileage, more power, it's lighter with less emissions, a totally new revamped engine dynamic. That's where they want to go. They're working with us to get there. And so that's another one of the reasons why we're so optimistic about the future, is because if the auto industry is going to advance rapidly, they need a better fuel. The better fuel is going to contain high octane. Ethanol is the lowest cost, highest octane fuel in the marketplace.
So what new technology do you see coming on the horizon that's going to be there 5-10 years from now, and what's the net positive energy cost of ethanol, or what do you think that number is today? Because that's been one of the numbers over time that has not been accurately reported.
Well, I think we've spent a lot of time in the ethanol industry. First off, how efficiently can we take that bushel of corn and produce ethanol? Back in the late 70s, early 80s, which kind of dates me a little bit, but we were pretty excited about a 2.5 gallons of ethanol per bushel of corn yield at an ethanol plant. Today, we are disappointed if it's not above 2.85 to 2.9. So there's been a lot of things that have been done within the industry. Energy used to be anywhere from 40,000 BTUs per gallon to higher. We're now in the mid to upper 20s. All of these things have done. So you're saying what's left. Okay, you've got this kernel of corn. What's left is the distiller's grains. Right now, the distiller's grains is used in ruminant cattle feeds, and what we're starting to do is dismantle it to a degree, and let's take the casserole and separate the noodles from the hamburger, because separately they're worth more than they are together. From a ruminant, they want the fiber, they want the energy. Let's take that out. For a monogastric like a poultry and hogs, they want the protein, so let's separate that out. Those are some of the things that are happening now in the industry to say, do we penetrate a completely different market? With hogs today, you can do 10 to 15% soybean or distiller's grain. Some do a little more. You're limited by the fiber. If we can take the fiber out, we can put more distiller's grains into those rations, and the same thing with poultry. So we're seeing that start to happen here in the U.S., and we're already doing that in our plant in Brazil, where we are separating the two products, selling a high protein product and a high fiber product. Those are some of the move forwards that I see happening here, along with some of the hybrids. We're doing some corn testing. They've got an 8% fat corn. That's twice as much corn oil. The good thing about it is more oil. The bad thing about it is it's going to be less starch, but oil's worth more than starch is. So there's things happening in the seed industry. There's things happening on the distiller side that will continue to add incremental value to the production facility.
Can I just add a little bit to that? As Dave is saying, we're diversifying our products that we sell. We are trying to make many more products out of corn that we have. We make a protein that we can use as a coating for pills or a plastic cover. We're getting into all kinds of different industries just on the starch-based side. It's a young industry yet. We're just starting to see what our potential is as a starch-based industry. And then, we opened up our first commercial cellulosic plant in about 2 years ago, and we've been working to optimize that. And we just announced that, along with our partner DSM, we're investing a lot more money on building an on-site enzyme development system. So we have a lot of confidence in cellulosic ethanol, as well as the expansion of starch-based. So our industry is where the oil industry was 150 years ago. We often say we can make anything out of a kernel of corn that the oil industry can make out of a barrel of oil. It's just a matter of economics and chemistry. And that's where we're going as an industry. We are just starting to get there.
Well, I want to go back to Dave real quick. You had mentioned Brazil. You brought up Brazil. And the ethanol industry is not just, an industry here in the U.S., but the question is, are U.S. ethanol players seeing more pressure from international players?
Well, I think the U.S. industry is for the most part operating with blinders on. The corn industry has gone much more global in its pricing and its delivery than it ever has been before. And when we see South America, specifically Argentina and Brazil, with the land mass they have available, their capabilities, Brazil is going to produce about 4 billion bushels of corn this year. The federal government initiative put out by their Department of Agriculture is they want to double corn production in the next 8 years. And they use less than 2 billion bushels domestically within their country. I was watching CNN the other night, or listening to it, I should say. I don't watch it. And they were talking how Trump had screwed up the Mexico market for corn, and they went somewhere else for their corn. Well, they didn't go anywhere else because of Trump. They went somewhere else because it's cheaper. And we've got some real competition coming at us for corn exports, and with the fuel ethanol industry, we're going to see competition from our ethanol exports coming from the country of Brazil. They have as much land mass as we do in the United States, and they are up to speed in their technology. You go to a farm in Mato Grosso, and they've got brand new John Deere combines. They've got 24, 36 row planters. They've got modern equipment, modern seeds, things like this. They're nipping at our heels. Their only disadvantage is they don't have an infrastructure, and they've got to truck it all to the water somewhere. So we have an advantage of freight. If that freight advantage goes away, United States will not be a corn export country.
Brooke, this question is probably suited for you, or at least we could start with you. Biodiesel has had a rocky time in catching momentum. The first question is why, and then now the American Soybean Association is asking the EPA to raise RFS volumes for biomass-based diesel, with the idea that biodiesel can help lower feed costs for hog producers. How likely is it that this volume increase will get passed? And I guess it's a two-part question there.
Yeah, I mean, so biodiesel is interesting because, I mean, the RFS is more than just a gasoline replacement, right? It replaces diesel. Biodiesel did not have as a robust standard in the original RFS, so they're already over their statutory requirement, and essentially it's up to EPA discretion to decide what they want. So problem number one is EPA doesn't feel like it has to get to the hoop, which is over there. It feels like it already dunked the basketball and can do whatever they want, right? Which is a problem underlying just the whole conversation, no matter what you do, and they're doing the best they can and advocating for the gallons. In terms of why they haven't gone further, I think this speaks to a bigger point that I wanted to make, which is, there is a distinct agricultural interest in the middle of this country in doing more biodiesel because there's an understanding about soy oil and markets and where it goes and how crushing works. But you get out to the coasts, and it's all about some of these campaigns that have been run against our industry, like land use change and whether we should be using food for fuel, et cetera, et cetera. And you really run into a problem politically with coastal Democrats in particular. So how did we pass the most disruptive, in a good way, renewable energy policy ever done in 2007? The answer is coastal Democrats are voting the same way as Iowa Republicans and Iowa senators, et cetera. And you had this unbreakable coalition that the other coalition that I work for, Fuels America, works on every day. So I think if we can make progress in that area and start to see these fuels as a broader effort towards, bridging what more conservative members of Congress and more liberal members of Congress want, I think you can get to where you want to go. And for all of the impatience, and I think healthy impatience that our industry has, this liquid biofuels industry is the largest renewable energy sector in this country already. And we're bigger than wind, we're bigger than solar from an employment perspective, and we really have an advantage, and we should take that employment and push it on the politics and get what we want.
The next question is for Doug. Cellulosic, another renewable that frankly seems to be stumbling. I know you mentioned that you're optimistic. I'm wondering why, because I'm hearing something very different about the cellulosic sector.
Right. No, cellulosic ethanol has stumbled. There have been a number of people that have tried and not made it. We've tried and we are making it. And we continue to invest in that technology because we think that it is part of the future with growing starch-based ethanol. And just to give everybody an idea, what we're doing in Emmitsburg is we built a 20 million, 25 million gallon cellulosic facility right next to a 50 million gallon starch plant. We bring in corn stover into the cellulosic plant. We make as much ethanol as we can, and there's a lot of residual waste in the form of solids and liquids. And so we put the solids and liquids through an anaerobic digester and a solid fuel boiler to make steam and biogas to power not only the cellulosic facility, but the grain-based facility as well, which means we turn off the natural gas spigot and we have now a self-sustaining multiple energy system that works. And it's amazing how it just feels like it's a natural progression that's really working. We're not at 100% capacity yet. It's hard. It's really hard to move biomass through these pipes. It's not the logistics, it's not getting the biomass, it's not the chemistry, it's been the engineering of moving biomass that has caused us issues. We have re-engineered and we've done a lot of things to make it work now, and we are running that plant continuously, which is really exciting. Look, when Dave got into this industry, the starch-based industry wasn't perfect either, right? There were some plants that were bankrupt, there were some issues, it took some years to perfect it. It's going to take some years to perfect cellulosic ethanol, but I think it is going to be a very big part of the rural landscape in the next 5 to 10 years.
What about solar energy? Anybody can address this, I guess. Brooke, is there life there? You hear about projects, outside investment money coming into projects like that, and then yet you hear some are pulling back. So what's the latest and the greatest on the solar energy?
Well, so I drove down here from Minneapolis. I saw just a few more corn cobs than windmills. I did not see any solar, but that does not mean that solar is not booming. I mean, the solar is driven by there's been a tremendous reduction in the price of a panel, and so there's a heck of a lot of good state policy. It kind of reminds me of how ethanol started, to be honest, before the Renewable Fuel Standard of 2005, and you know, the industry relied on state policy and producer tax credits and in places like Iowa and Minnesota, and that was critical. And I think the same is true for solar, and now they're sort of catching their wind a little bit. Solar couldn't be more popular in Massachusetts. It almost makes me a little sick to my stomach how people talk about solar 24/7. But you know, it's all part of this big renewable energy push, that Big Tent push that'll help on the politics.
And what does the advanced biofuel industry have to do to succeed at the next level?
Well, I think we've touched on it today. I think the bad rap is that, the technology hasn't worked, and I think if your deployment is slower, that's what people jump to, and that's not what's going on. So we've had a very bumpy policy road. 2007 law gets passed, rules don't get done till 10. Obama stops enforcing law in 13. Never mind the 100-year recession that happened in that gap. Finally get it back on track in 2016, and now we've got this court case pushing us. So what we really need is a place for the fuel to go. And that's why our council testified at the top of our lungs on the RVP bill in mid-June. E15, E20, yeah, that's market for first-gen ethanol, but that's also a place for second-gen ethanol to go. And at the end of the day, you got to have a market to get those investors to build plants, and even when the investors are yourself.
And DDGs, it was rolling along real nicely there for a while, and then China stopped buying, and now where do we get new markets for DDGs?
Well, you got to bear in mind most of the issue is political. China was paying too much base. They had their floor for corn was too high. They ended up with all this corn. They needed to force this corn out into the market, and the easy way to do that was shut off the DDG coming in as a feed product. This had nothing to do with quality of DDG. It had nothing to do with reliability of supply. It had everything to do with their own political agenda in their own country. No different than our political agenda in this country limiting our ability to market our ethanol. And I think one thing too, to speak back a little bit to what Coleman said, when we're talking about things like solar, the support that solar has gotten in the past has allowed them to develop very, very, very simplistic solar panels that we are installing as fast as we can in places like Mozambique, South Africa, so that kids can have a light bulb so they can study and do their homework instead of being in the dark. there is some real opportunity for solar globally, just like there is for wind industry globally, not just here. But the developments are being done here. The U.S. is known for its developmental technology, and our ability to get that out to the world is just going to make the world a better place for a lot of people.
Anything else you'd like to add, any of you that we haven't asked today?
Well, yeah, I would just love to touch on what we're calling an impending ag crisis. Iowa farm incomes are down 50% from 2013. I don't know if anybody's feeling that in here, but those are the numbers. We have yields that are increasing dramatically. They're increasing faster than expected. The demand, the traditional demand for corn has not changed for 30 years. Biofuels are the one thing that have soaked up surplus grain and given agriculture a good run over the last 15 years or so. Biofuels has not been growing. Yields continue to go up, which means the price is coming down, and that's not a good thing. There's one thing that can soak up surplus grains right now, and that's biofuels. We need more biofuels in the fuel supply. And I'd just like to go back to another thing that was touched on a couple times here. We passed the Renewable Fuel Standard in 05 and 07 somewhat as a result of 9/11, the terrorist attack on this country. We do not want to rely on foreign sources of oil, so we passed an RFS. Well, we forgot about that politically. This is why the coastal senators and congressmen aren't all that interested. They've been tainted by the myths that have been perpetrated, and there's no crisis. Well, there's going to be a crisis, and it's called an ag crisis, and more biofuels can maybe not solve it, but they can certainly relieve it by lifting up prices here. Because if we have an ag crisis in this country, we're going to have an economic crisis in this country. Agriculture is the backbone of our economy. We can see it coming just as plain as day, and hopefully we can get that message out to prop up the RFS, get more biofuels in the fuel system, works on our economy, our national security, cleans up the environment. All those things are good. But as Brooke said, we're up against the most powerful force on the face of the planet, which is petroleum, that want to maintain their market share.
The only thing I would add in 30 seconds, and then Dave can have the last 2 minutes, but is we got to make sure to tell our story in DC. All the efficiency gains. You come to events like this from places like Boston or DC, and you hear about all this incredible thing, all these incredible things that are happening. You hear that agriculture's changed in the last 7 to 9 years more than it changed in the last 2 decades before that. And we got to get that story. We got to do a better job. And I'm not saying you. I'm saying us. We got to get that message east and west, because I'm telling you, a lot of the senators that have real issues with agriculture will be shocked at how many of the things that they want us to do we've already done.
I think I would like to really speak back to when the ethanol industry got its sea legs, and that would have been in the mid-90s with something called the Minnesota model, for lack of a better term. Poet built many of their early plants in Minnesota. Why? Because they had a program for marketing the ethanol. They had a mandate, I think at that time. They had a tax credit. They had a number of other things. And it made sense to build the plant in Minnesota. We started out with little 10 million gallon a year plants. The first one was in Winthrop, Minnesota, and Heartland Corn Products. And that plant is now over 100 million gallons. And all of those plants have done multiple expansions since they were built. But you started down here, and who did it? The farmers. Heartland Corn Products was a co-op. The farmers that brought grain there had to sign it away, and the first money would be to the bank, and you may not get one plug nickel for your bushel of corn. That's how much risk the farmer was willing to take to open up his market and start making progress. Today, you've got the exact same issue here in Iowa. You've got refineries here, and you are exporting your product at wholesale so you can buy somebody else's product at retail. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounds like that's a stupid idea. And where are we going to go? Where are we going to go from here? Where are we going to get our take action? Where are we going to talk to our stations, gas stations? Where are we going to put higher blends, E20, E30 on our farm? Are we willing to put it in our lawnmower and tractor and car? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because the last time I did that I was disappointed. But the point is, what are you doing? Are you going to wait and see if someone else does something for you? As Doug said, we have an ag crisis staring us right in the face. We have other countries that are growing their agriculture at record pace. If we don't do anything to use our product here, we probably deserve what happens to us, and it will happen within the next 10 years.
Dave, Brooke, Doug, thank you very much for your time, and we're out of time.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to
Thanks
you
for
guys.
having us, Bruce.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good job.